आज हमारे साथ बहुत स्पेशल मेहमान हैं, यूके से तशरीफ़ लाए हैं और इसमें कुछ ऐसी शख्सियात हैं कि जिनसे मुतारफ़ होकर बात करके यकीनन आपके इल्म में भी इजाफ़ा होगा और बहुत दिलचस्प बातें भी आपको पता चलेंगी। मेरे साथ मौजूद हैं जनाब क्रेग मरे, जो कि एम्बेसडर उज़्बेकिस्तान में रहे हैं, मगर ये उनके तारुफ़ का एक हवाला है। इस और बहुत से हवाले हैं और वो बड़े दिलचस्प हैं। और उनके साथ हैं मिस्टर पीटर ओबोन, जो कि ना सिर्फ राइटर हैं, एक साफ़ी रहे हैं, साहिब किताब हैं, बहुत सी कुतुब इन्होंने लिखी हैं, मगर कुछ किताबें ऐसी हैं जो हमारे एरिया और हमारे मुसलमानों के हवाले से हमारे राइट्स को रिप्रेजेंट करती हैं। मैं इधर दोस्तों की तरफ आता हूँ और जब आप हमारा ये शो देखेंगे तो इसमें सब टाइटल्स होंगे, इसलिए आप इसे समझ सकेंगे। थैंक यू वेरी मच फॉर giving us time, Mr. Craig Murray and Mr. Peter Obon. So let's begin with Murray, with you. I was really amazed to know that you have been pursuing certain causes which have landed you in trouble in a country like UK, where we cite it for the human rights and all that. So what is this story all about?
Well, unfortunately, the UK's reputation for human rights is diminishing. And like much of the Western world, there's a big gulf over Palestine in particular and Gaza between the people and the government, where the government are entirely enthralled to Israel and support Israel, even in the middle of a massacre and a genocide. But the people are against it. And so the government have become scared of their own people and are reacting with repression. I was arrested under the Terrorism Act, and I'm now under investigation for terrorism
by
the police in the UK, because I stated that occupied people in law have the right of armed resistance, which is undoubtedly true in international law. But that was seen as a statement supporting Hamas, and so now I find myself under investigation for terrorism, which is...
Have you ever been arrested for that? Are you served summons on you?
I was detained, and I was arrested, detained. They took all my laptops and my telephones, everything away from me. And then they presented me with a letter saying I'm under investigation for terrorism.
Mr. Peter, well, I have been looking at your books, and you very courageously supported the fair causes, of course, I must say. But there's one thing, when we look at now European societies and particularly UK, we see huge outbursts. People supporting causes like Gaza, they feel very strongly about the massacre in Gaza. But somehow the governments and the people are not on the same page. Why? We don't understand it. Why it is so? Why the governments are, they run counter to the electorate as far as these policies are concerned?
It's very interesting. By the way, Mr. Murray, or Ambassador Murray, was right to say the government was divorced from the people, but it's also the opposition party, the Labour Party, historically would have been pro-Palestinian in this, or at least appalled by the atrocities being committed by Israel and Gaza. But in fact, the Labour leader, Keir Starmer, at the very start of the attacks on Gaza, said that he supported what in effect was collective punishment, which is against international law and all humanity. So it's both major parties have allied themselves with Israel and refused to condemn the massacres, the atrocities, the genocidal statements made by leading Israeli politicians, up to and including the president, and also the terrible things which are being done to the people of Gaza.
Mr. Murray, one very interesting point that Mr. Peter made, that now they are on the opposition and the ruling party have the same policies. But there is another, we have been seeing after the Blair stints, 2 or 3 stints, we have also seen all the distinction between the Labour and the Tory party. They have kind of diminished or dissipated. Now both the parties represent the same interests. They represent the interests of the big business, and all the gains that the Labour and the working class had through Labour, they are being taken away like NHS and all that. So I think now it is the same and one party.
I think that's absolutely true. It's like a uni-party. You have a choice of colour of Conservative Party. That's the choice you are given at at the election. And this is happening at a time where, and it's money which is behind it. The politicians have become...
Money in what sense?
Politicians have become a professional class who go into politics not out of ideology or belief, but for a career. And then they are, not only do they receive the state payments, they receive payment from lobbyists, and the Israel lobby is perhaps...
Are they legal? Are they under the table?
It's a combination. Mostly it is legal. Mostly it is grants and donations where they're given money to keep their office, money to employ staff. But then, of course...
to renovate your home like your previous PM did.
But then, of course, there are understandings that after you have left office, there is more money coming and there are jobs and positions. And so it's quite sophisticated and mostly legal, but at base, the politicians are bought. Bluntly, that is the truth of what has happened. And so you have disconnect not only on issues like Gaza. You have this enormous increase in the wealth gap between rich and poor in the United States. You have over 1 million pensioners living in poverty, over 4 million children living in poverty, in a nation where now the 1,000 richest people in the United Kingdom have an average wealth of £750 million. And yet we have children who can't afford proper food. And in the sixth richest country in the world.
I hear a lot about soup chickens and, the food banks. They are inundated, Is that true?
It's true. If you go particularly to northern towns, but also in parts of London, there are families who are entirely dependent on charity from food banks in order to feed their children. And that's an appalling disgrace.
Mr. Peter, there is, again, kind of a class conflict surfacing again. We have seen a lot of activity, at least at the level of your trade unions, and there was a lot of hue and cry, and they were being attacked on all the, official media. Do you think it's going to make any difference in the politics, and are we coming back to the same old days that remind us of the Cold War sort of thing, because there are constantly attacks on the living standards of people because of inflation and everything. So how do you look at unfolding it?
I think that we are going to enter, or we are in the middle of going through some seismic change in British politics. It hasn't worked itself out fully yet. To give a historical context, I think that after the World War II, we had the great Attlee government of 1945, which invented the welfare state in Britain and the NHS, and a social democratic settlement, really, which lasted. The Tories were too frightened. It was too popular for the Conservatives to challenge it. And this lasted until the late 1970s. That's 30 years it lasted. And then you get the arrival of Margaret Thatcher and the neoliberalism as the dominant ideology, which was not just Thatcher, it was taken on by Tony Blair. And that system, the system of neoliberalism and the gradual attacks on the institutions of the welfare state, but not just that, other British institutions, that went on until 2008-10 with the financial crisis. We're now going through a very profound change. We don't know what is going to emerge, what new system is going to emerge, but we're looking ahead at this year's general election in Britain. What you're seeing is a rise of independent candidates challenging basically the cross-party system. In fact, on Gaza, for instance, an actual cross-party merger between the two major parties, and you're going to see a run of independent candidates, not just against Labour. So in my friend Andrew Feinstein in Holborn is going to be running, I think, probably against Keir Starmer. He's a former advisor to Nelson Mandela.
Can Keir Starmer lose? Can he lose?
I don't think he's lose, but I think that one of the nasty things which has happened, really nasty, and it's frightening, and it can go horrible ways, is the rise of Islamophobia in British politics, the hostility to Islam. Both parties.
Muslims are being demonized?
All the time now. I mean, the classic case of point is these very powerful demonstrations across British cities against the Gaza atrocities, or just calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. And the people who are supporting Palestinian rights in those demonstrations are being accused by senior conservative politicians, I mean, members of the government, of being mobs.
Do you see any new party emerging?
No, this is, and Labour has not got the guts to stand up against this ugly rhetoric again. Meanwhile, there is no price to be paid in the two major parties for supporting Israel as it is carrying out these atrocities. And so the people who are being accused of being extremists are the people standing up for Palestinian rights. This is wrong.